And the recording has started. So, hello everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. This is the DSC community call for January 31st. I'm sharing my screen, which shows our agenda for today. So, first off the bat, actually, Michael, if you wouldn't mind going around and introducing the people who are in the conference room on the call again, just so we.
Sure, we'll make the rounds. My name is Michael Green. I'm the PM for DSC.
I'm Steve Morawski, developer advocate here at Azure.
I'm Katie.
Needs no further introduction.
That's right.
No, I'm right here.
Please, Chair.
Cool. Sounds good.
Hello.
Great. So for today, just to kick things off, we have a couple of modules that are on track to be released on Wednesday, February 7th. So that includes Storage DSC, SQL Server DSC, and then X Active Directory, X Computer Management, X Database, X Exchange, X Failover Cluster, X Hyper-V, and X Networking. Were there any other agenda items that people want to talk about today? Are there any issues that need discussing or carryover items from last month? I was not here last month, so.
I actually have a quick one, Zach. So we are looking at hiring a contractor whose primary focus would be working on outstanding community submissions that need to be removed and moved through the pipeline. But more importantly, like looking systemically at how we can accelerate this process, especially looking at how we can improve our test process so that, community submissions are able to move more quickly. So if anyone, especially maintainers, but it's a very specialized skill set. So if anyone would be interested in something like that, it would be a full-time contract, probably for 4 to 5 months. Please reach out to us and just let us know you'd be interested. We'll start working towards, looking for proposals and things like that pretty quickly. But if any of our maintainers just happen to be looking for something like that, I wanted to make sure that that they understand that the door is open and that's going to be happening. So definitely would be interested in talking to people because it's a skill set that I highly appreciate the people who have put time into developing. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, this is Steve. From the systemic side of things, the testability, coming up with a community pattern, an accepted community pattern around how to stand up and integration test those resources would be a very valuable thing. It's one of the things that blocks me from contributing. There's no easy way to stand up and test.
Cool. Thanks, Zach.
No problem. And then I just want to make sure everyone on the call is aware that we put out a blog post talking about DSC a bit more and what we're planning for it. I should probably throw a link into the agenda just to make sure everyone sees it, but it's on the PowerShell blog in case you haven't seen it.
I'll put a link in the IM window for everybody. If there are any questions, more than happy to answer them or to take follow-ups afterwards. If not, we can go through the list of what's going live this month.
All right.
I didn't know if anybody had any questions for any specific areas, but
yeah, it doesn't look like anyone does. Feel free to IM or take yourself off mute.
yeah. Any questions on resources that are being actively worked or how to address issues or anything like that? If not, then we're good.
Okay. I'm totally happy that we have a quick meeting today. So I'm just going to give one last chance in case anyone has anything else they want to talk about while we're all here.
I can bring up one thing. I got an issue in xfailover cluster. Let's talk about a support case you got. It talks about an X-Cluster Azure VM resource.
Yeah, let me give an update on that one.
Yeah.
So the way that Windows clusters work inside of Azure as VMs in Azure, I mean, the clustering still works the same way. It's just like what's the supported architecture, and it really comes down to the shared IP address on a cluster. You know, if you're sitting in a data center, then you just have a shared IP that is available on all the nodes. The cluster manages where communications are going, you know, by bringing that IP online on different machines. In Azure, you know, there is no sharing IPs between VMs. So you have to take the IP that's going to be used even inside that virtual network and move it to the Azure load balancer, and then have each of the nodes in the cluster be one of the machines that can be the private side of that. And what we're looking at is that doesn't really work with the X-Cluster resource. The cluster team had already published a new resource, but it was inside one of the Azure Quick Start templates for deploying a SQL cluster, and that creates, you know, in Azure, that their Quick Start template takes care of creating a load balancer and such, but more importantly, the DSC resource interacting with the Windows OS inside the VMs was using a link local IP so that the traffic is not trying to route, and that way it doesn't like. What happens is, for some reason, if you're adding nodes from like the cluster manager UI, the MMC snap-in, then you're able to reach the other node and bring it online. But if you're going through any of the automation tools, then it looks like the RPC traffic, if you're using a normal shared IP through a load balancer, it tries to go through the load balancer, and the load balancer doesn't accept the RPC traffic. But if you're using a link local IP, it doesn't try to route the traffic, so then it works fine. So the next phase that needs to happen is I will pull that out of the Quick Start template. We're going to switch from a IPv4 link local IP to an IPv6 link local IP, and then that's the only change that will happen to the resource. I'll stand that up. The cluster team is just going to evaluate that test environment using that resource. I'll spin up a test environment using that resource, and the cluster team will evaluate it. And assuming that nothing looks inconsistent, then I will submit a new resource to you for review. And I'll probably name it something like X-Cluster Azure VM so that it's very clear, and then I'll add to the documentation as well as to what the purpose of that would be. But if that sounds good to you, then I'll try to get it submitted as soon as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Great. Anything else people want to talk about? Alrighty. Well, I'm going to call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Meeting notes and recording will be going up soon.
Very good.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thanks, Zach.